What's your favorite thing about being a dad?
Well, what I love most about being a dad is having these one-on-one conversations with my boys where they have an aha moment, and you just know that there's a connection, and that they got a piece of my wisdom, something that was painful for me in my life to learn, and it took me a long time to learn. And I tell them a story, or we ask a question, and there's an answer that resonates, and you just know that they got it.
Yeah, I think my favorite part of being a dad is it's similar to what Seth is saying. It's where I think it's when I'm not actually interacting with my kids, but I'm watching them and observing them and then seeing them put into practice something that I've taught them. So it's a little bit self-serving, I guess, in that way, but it also benefits them, being able to see that I've helped prepare them to live in the world, and just seeing them take those things and do them on their own is really gratifying for me.
What's the thing you fear most about this time that you have with your kids while they're still in your house?
I don't know if it's so much that it's a fear, but it's definitely a sense of urgency. So I definitely feel. I mean, I have a 15-year-old son now, and it feels like the time just went by like that. And there's so much that I want him to know and to have, both while he's at home and before he leaves the house, and just that sense of urgency is pretty pressing.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really afraid of is that I remember that when I had my newborn son, and I looked him in the eyes, and I just thought, I'm going to pass down to you everything I know. And I was doing the math the other day, and there's only like 6,500 days between the time that he's born and until he moves out of my house. And he's 15 years old, and I just don't feel like I've really given him those moments that I believed I was going to give him. I mean, what, I got like 600, 700 days left, and I'm just really afraid that this time's just evaporating.
So I think what can be hard is, as a dad, you have all these other responsibilities. Very notably, your full time job, and so you come home from work, and your kids have homework, and there's dinner preparation going on, and a lot of times the amount of time that you have to actually spend with your kids can be very short. A few minutes here and there, and in that time, if nothing arises organically to discuss, that's a bigger theme, or that's a deeper theme. Time just goes by, days go by, and these topics don't come up. So that was one of the reasons we created Dad Cards. Was so even though opportunities for meaningful discussions don't always arise organically just in that short time period on a weekend or in an evening, we wanted to create something that would help spark those conversations so they could happen at the time when we're both around and we both have time to do it. And
I'm so frustrated because I am giving my blood to be a good dad. I mean, this is what I care about more than anything else. I really love it. But when it comes down to it, on a daily basis, I come home and I'm stressed. I'm shut down. I don't feel like I want to share myself with anybody. And I'm thinking, why am I giving all of my blood and sweat to a job and not get the benefit of my bargain when I come home? I mean, this is the whole point. And I get home and I'm just spent. I don't have anything. I don't have connection. I can't engage. I don't have ideas. I have no idea how to be deliberate. And I got these kids. They don't know any better, and they climb on me, and they want to engage, and they're ready. And they're saying, Dad, what are we going to do tonight? And I just am shut down. I just feel empty. And I'm clueless, and I'm not ready to take advantage of that moment because I'm so, I have no vision for what I'm even supposed to do when the moment really arises. And it's so frustrating because every time I look back, I think, man, I could have done so much with that moment. And when I do have those magic moments, it's the best. It gives me energy to do that hard job. It gives me energy to go slay the dragon for them. But so often it's so frustrating because I just lose it. I just lose that opportunity when they're ready for it.
so the idea of Dad Cards started about 20 years ago when Seth and I were in college, and this was, I guess, before we ever had kids. We became friends, and we knew we would become parents at some point. So we were talking about this so the idea of Dad Cards really started about 20 years ago when Seth and I were in college. We were just married, and it was something that came up when we would get together for dinner with our wives. we would talk about when we were going to have kids and how we would raise them. And then time goes by, of course, and over the years we started having kids. And during this time, we became avid readers, and we would talk and have long phone conversations and email conversations and chat conversations during work about the things we were learning. And part of the reason for that was because as we had kids, they became the most pressing and most important thing in our lives. So we would want to pass the things that we were learning on to them. Sometimes that was tough because, you read a nonfiction book and it's a big, thick book with complex ideas, and being able to distill that down into a conversation and make time for it and interest our kids in it. It was a challenge, especially, after a long day of work when you're tired. So a couple of years ago, we were out hiking in the Sawtooth Mountains together and just kind of throwing around these ideas. And our kids were getting older. I think Max at this time, my oldest, was 13 or 14. And the time started feeling pressing. So we wanted to really be deliberate about taking whatever wisdom we had gained from whatever sources we had and condensing it into something that we could actually take action on and use with our kids. And so that was the beginning of Dad Cards. We didn't know there would be cards at the time. We didn't know how we wanted to do it. We were just brainstorming. But that was where the spark of the idea came from.
So Dad Cards started when we were in college. My wife and Marcus's wife traveled to Italy together, and that's how we were introduced as friends. Is when they were in college, they introduced us to each other, and we had a lot of intellectual interest in common. Curious about the same kind of things. We speak Spanish, and we have interest in the liberal arts and literature and history and philosophy. And so after college, our curiosity for these subjects really just continued to grow, and we started to debate books. And every month we'd get a book, and we'd pick maybe one or two books, maybe even more sometimes a month. And we would get on the phone and we'd just argue about it and say, this is what I think about it. Or we would write these kind of almost essay form debates arguing about these ideas. And what it was doing is it was distilling the ideas of every book that we were reading. And what started to occur, and I think it was just one of the wonderful parts of this kind of relationship, is that we're able to distill a whole book into just a few paragraphs. We're able to understand the reasoning and the thoughts and the argument of any particular book just in a really refined synopsis. And they became very valuable because we were able to shorthand great ideas in little time. And that created gems because we're able to explain to each other a book within 2 minutes or less. We can take an idea that's really complex, really powerful, and distill it into these bite-sized synopses that, in under 2 minutes or less, we can understand an idea that was otherwise complex and simplify it.
How did that lead to Dad Cards?
So what happened is these complex ideas, when we distilled it into a 2-minute presentation that was simple and coherent, is that we got to thinking, this is something that we can provide to our kids, because we want our kids to have all of these books that we were experiencing. I mean, I'm just so proud of having read, for example, Moby Dick or Don Quixote. These books mean so much to me, and I just don't know how I'm going to distill this and give this to my kid unless I can give it to him in a really small soundbite. And that's what we started to do. We started to refine it. We've been doing a lot of camping, and I have 3 boys, and Marcus has 2 boys, and we wanted to give our kids a passage into adulthood. And what we're concerned about is that our kids are in a generation that seem like they're not getting outside. When I moved into my neighborhood after school, no kid was going to the swimming pool in the summer. Everybody was just locked in their house, playing video games, watching TV, and nobody was playing on the streets. And I'm thinking, I moved into this neighborhood with a calculated decision that there's going to be a bunch of kids in the neighborhood that are around my kid's age, and they're going to socialize and they're going to integrate. But they weren't able to integrate because nobody was going outside. And so I was afraid, and this is the conversation that Marcus and I have had over and over again, how are we going to engage these kids so that they can have this childhood that we envision them having instead of just incubating in this little cocoon in their home, insulated from the whole world. And Dad Cards was meant to pull us outside of ourselves, pull us outside the homes, pull us outside to do those traditional activities that you think childhood should be about.
So there's really three types of dad cards, or there's three areas that we wanted to cover. And the first one is kind of the mental culture of the kid, right? So we wanted to have kids who would do well in this information age. They would be able to focus when everyone else is out playing video games. They would be able to use their minds and be creative when other kids are watching videos on YouTube or doing whatever else they're doing. So we want them to be prepared to enter into a workforce where their minds are sharp and ready to go. So that's one area. And the other area is we want kids who are socially well-rounded. Like one experience I had was I went to Uruguay and I would meet these kids who were children of ambassadors or, usually Americans working down there for whatever reason. I was so impressed with how well these kids could talk to adults and interact with them. And they were completely comfortable. They were well-spoken. And then they would go out and play with their friends, and they were completely normal teenagers. And that was something that stuck with me, and I wanted to make sure my kids had those types of qualities. So they would do well in job interviews, but also do well socially. And then the third area is Seth and I love camping. We love being in the outdoors. So a lot of the cards have to do with these sort of primal experiences that connect us with the earth, whether it's related to conservation, or there's a card, for example, about building a fire. We have cards about looking up at the stars and learning constellations, and even cards about, there's a card, for example, about memorizing poetry. But really what it means to memorize poetry is to be able to appreciate the world around you and to experience it in a very tangible and visceral way. So between those three things, the internal or the mental culture of the kid and their social relationships and then their relationship with the earth, that's kind of the categories that each card falls into. And it gives them, you can have a discussion about it, or you can go out and actually take the suggestion on the card for the activity and do it and experience it.
So Dad Cards is a way to get a meaningful experience in a very short amount of time without having to plan it in advance. And so it's any dad card should be able to be read in 2 minutes or less and understood well and delivered in about 15 minutes. And you can cook a meal in 15 minutes. You can clean a fish in 15 minutes. You can start a fire in 15 minutes. You can memorize a poem in 15 minutes. You can do any of these dad cards in a very, very short amount of time, and they're meaningful experiences. And when you have a deck of 52 cards that are that accessible, what we're hoping Dad Cards does is it creates 52 more meaningful experiences that you can have as a dad that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
I see dad cards as being 52 potential memories to have with your kids. So it's 52 activities you can have, 52 conversations that are possible. And they're more than that. They're a way for, even though Seth and I wrote the cards, they're a way for, they're not meant to be us passing on our wisdom. They're meant to be something to where you take this and you read this and it brings up stories from your life or things that you've learned. So it's really just a spark. It's a little bit of each card is only 1 or 2 paragraphs, but it should be enough to where it brings out something in you that you can pass on to your kids and make their life more meaningful.